Wow, listener, you really weren't kidding when you said this story was intense. A first-hand account of being wrongfully convicted in the UAE. That's some heavy stuff.
And what's truly alarming is this case, it appears to be part of a much larger pattern of international crime involving fake WhatsApps, illicit money flowing across borders, and a legal system that seems to make things worse instead of better.
Yeah, for this deep dive, you submitted some seriously compelling material. So how about we unpack this together, step by step?
Absolutely. Let's break down exactly what happened, identify the key players, and see where we can extract some valuable insights along the way.
Okay, so your story begins with what seems like a pretty normal business dealing. You were working with a travel agent named Abid Khan, I think you said.
Right.
But as we now know, this was anything but ordinary.
Right. From the outset, it's crucial to understand that these criminal syndicates, they thrive on deception. They create elaborate schemes designed to exploit our trust in seemingly legitimate interactions.
It's like getting a WhatsApp message that looks completely authentic, maybe even from someone you've interacted with before, and then bam, you're caught in their web.
Exactly. They prey on the fact that we often take these digital interactions at face value, especially when they appear to come from trusted sources.
So how do they go from a seemingly harmless WhatsApp message to something as serious as money laundering and potential drug trafficking?
Well, in your case, it seems they use these fake WhatsApp numbers and business propositions to build trust. Then they convinced you to share your bank details under the guise of facilitating legitimate transactions.
And as soon as they had that information, I imagine things took a dark turn.
That's right. They likely deposited funds into your account, money obtained through illegal activities like drug trafficking. When authorities inevitably investigate, they see these suspicious transactions, and you become the prime suspect, even though you had absolutely no idea where the money came from.
So you're essentially caught in a carefully constructed trap designed to make you look like the criminal.
Precisely. It's a classic setup, and sadly, one that's becoming increasingly common as these criminal networks leverage technology to expand their reach.
You mentioned that they froze your bank account. Can you tell us a little more about what happened there?
Of course, it appears they manipulated your account to make it seem like you were complicit in their money laundering operation. Essentially, they're using legitimate accounts like yours to obscure the origin of their illegal funds, making it incredibly difficult for authorities to trace the money back to its source.
It's like they're hiding in plain sight, using the complexities of the financial system to shield their activities.
That's a great way to put it. And that's precisely what makes these crimes so challenging to combat. They're often deeply intertwined with legal businesses and transactions, making it extremely difficult to separate the legitimate from the criminal.
This whole situation is starting to feel a little too close for comfort, to be honest. Listener, I'm getting a bit paranoid just thinking about it. What can we do to protect ourselves from these sophisticated scams?
That's a perfectly valid reaction. Awareness is the first line of defense. We need to be incredibly cautious about who we trust online, especially when it comes to financial dealings.
So what are some concrete steps we can take to avoid becoming a victim?
First and foremost, never share your bank details with anyone you don't know and trust completely. And I mean completely. Verify everything. Don't just take someone's word for it. If a business proposition or investment opportunity sounds too good to be true, it probably is. These criminals often prey on people's desire for quick and easy money.
So we need to be extra vigilant about those unsolicited offers that promise the world, especially when they come from people or organizations we haven't thoroughly vetted.
Exactly. And if you're using online communication platforms, stick to trusted and secure channels. Fake WhatsApp numbers and email addresses are incredibly easy to create, so always double-check who you're talking to. Look for inconsistencies in their communication style or any requests that seem out of place.
Okay, so verify everything, be cautious with our bank details, and watch out for those too good to be true offers. Anything else we should keep in mind?
Absolutely. If you're doing business internationally, it's crucial to understand the legal and regulatory landscape of the countries you're dealing with. Different countries have different laws and procedures, and what might be considered standard practice in one country could be illegal in another.
So do your research and make sure you're operating within the bounds of the law.
Precisely. And if something just feels off, don't hesitate to report it to the authorities. It's always better to err on the side of caution. Trust your instincts.
So we've talked about the setup, the methods, and some ways to protect ourselves, but there's still one piece of the puzzle that I'm really curious about. This Abid Khan character, he seems to be at the heart of this whole operation. Who is he, and how does he fit into this larger criminal syndicate?
That's a great question, and one that we'll explore in more detail in the next part of our deep dive. What we know so far is that Abid Khan was your initial point of contact, the person who allegedly lured you into this web of deceit. But he's likely just one player in a much larger and more complex criminal network.
So this isn't just a case of one bad apple. We're dealing with a sophisticated organization with multiple layers and individuals involved in various aspects of the operation.
Exactly. And understanding the structure and operations of these criminal syndicates is essential if we want to effectively combat them.
Well, listener, we've laid the groundwork now. Let's take a quick pause, and then we'll dive even deeper into the inner workings of this criminal enterprise in part 2 of our deep dive.
So we've established that this Abid Khan, he's likely just one piece of a much larger puzzle. These criminal syndicates, they're often structured like a pyramid with layers of operatives, each playing a specific role.
Okay, so if we imagine this pyramid with Abid Khan somewhere near the bottom who's pulling the strings at the top.
That's the million-dollar question. And unfortunately, one that's incredibly difficult to answer. These organizations, they're designed to protect those at the top. They operate in secrecy, using code names and constantly shifting communication channels to avoid detection.
It sounds like something out of a spy thriller, all these secret layers and shadowy figures operating behind the scenes.
It's not far off. The reality is that we often only get glimpses of these networks when someone like Abid Khan gets caught. But the real masterminds, the ones orchestrating these elaborate schemes, often remain hidden in the shadows.
It's both fascinating and terrifying to think about this vast network of criminal activity operating right under our noses.
Exactly. And it highlights the need for increased vigilance and international cooperation if we want to dismantle these organizations.
You mentioned that these syndicates are often involved in multiple criminal activities beyond just money laundering. What are some of the other ways they generate revenue?
Well, as you pointed out in your story, there's a strong possibility of drug trafficking being involved. These organizations often leverage their existing networks and logistical expertise to move illegal substances across borders.
That makes sense. They already have the infrastructure in place to move money discreetly, so why not use it for other illicit purposes?
Precisely. And it's not just drugs. We're talking about human trafficking, weapons smuggling, counterfeit goods, you name it. These syndicates are constantly looking for new and innovative ways to exploit vulnerabilities and generate profits.
It paints a pretty bleak picture, but I'm curious, how do these organizations manage to stay under the radar for so long? They're clearly operating on a massive scale, so how do they avoid detection?
That's where their sophisticated tactics and global reach come into play. They exploit weaknesses in international law enforcement, making it incredibly difficult for authorities in one country to effectively pursue criminals operating in another.
It sounds like they're always one step ahead, taking advantage of jurisdictional loopholes and the challenges of coordinating investigations across borders.
Exactly. And they're constantly adapting their methods, using advanced technology to stay ahead of law enforcement agencies. They operate in the dark web, utilize encrypted communication channels, and frequently change their tactics to avoid detection.
So it's not just about catching the low-level operatives like Abid Khan. We need to target the entire network, dismantle their infrastructure, and disrupt their ability to operate.
That's the ultimate goal. But it requires a coordinated global effort involving intelligence sharing, joint task forces, and a commitment to closing the loopholes that these organizations exploit.
It's a daunting task, but it's clear that we can't afford to ignore this threat any longer. The stakes are simply too high.
Absolutely. The impact of these criminal networks goes far beyond just financial losses. They undermine the rule of law, fuel corruption, and destabilize entire regions. We need to recognize the severity of this threat and dedicate the resources necessary to combat it effectively.
You mentioned earlier that money laundering is a key component of these syndicates' operations. Can you break down exactly how they use this tactic to clean their dirty money?
Of course. Money laundering is essentially the process of taking money obtained through illegal activities and making it appear legitimate. There are three main stages: placement, layering, and integration.
Okay, so placement is the initial step where they introduce the dirty money into the financial system. What does that look like in practice?
It could involve depositing small amounts of cash into various bank accounts, using shell companies to disguise the origin of the funds, or purchasing high-value assets like real estate or artwork.
So they're essentially trying to blend their dirty money in with legitimate transactions, making it harder to track.
Exactly. Then comes the layering stage, where they create complex layers of financial transactions to further obscure the money trail. This could involve transferring funds between multiple accounts, both domestically and internationally, or using a series of shell companies to make it nearly impossible to trace the money back to its source.
It sounds incredibly intricate and deliberately designed to confuse investigators.
That's the whole point. They want to create a web of transactions so complex that it's virtually impossible to unravel.
And finally, they reach the integration stage where they reintroduce the now clean money back into the legitimate economy.
Right. They might invest in legitimate businesses, purchase luxury goods, or simply withdraw the funds as if they were earned through legal means. At this point, the money has been effectively laundered and is virtually indistinguishable from legitimate funds.
So it's a multi-step process that requires careful planning and a network of complicit individuals and institutions.
Precisely. And it's a critical component of these criminal syndicates' operations, allowing them to reinvest their profits, expand their networks, and continue their illicit activities.
It's clear that we need to do more to disrupt these money laundering operations, both domestically and internationally. If we can cut off their financial lifelines, we can significantly weaken their ability to operate.
I completely agree. We need to strengthen financial regulations, enhance international cooperation, and invest in technology that can help us detect and track these illicit financial flows.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've learned about the structure of these criminal syndicates, their diverse criminal activities, and their sophisticated money laundering tactics. Now, listener, let's shift our focus to the legal battle you faced in the UAE and the implications for doing business internationally. We'll explore that in more detail in part 3 of our deep dive. So, listener, we've uncovered this dark underbelly of these criminal syndicates and their sophisticated methods. Now let's shift our focus to your personal experience within the UAE legal system and try to extract some insights that might help others avoid a similar nightmare.
Yeah, you described a system that seemed almost designed to make things worse, not better, with roadblocks at every turn and a distinct lack of transparency.
It sounds incredibly frustrating. You were caught in this elaborate trap, accused of crimes you didn't commit, and then faced with a legal system that seemed indifferent to your pleas of innocence.
Sadly, this highlights a critical issue for anyone doing business internationally. You're essentially operating within a different set of rules and legal frameworks. And if something goes wrong, navigating those systems can be incredibly challenging, especially if you're not familiar with the local laws and customs.
In your case, you were sentenced to 3 years in prison, deportation, and blacklisting from the UAE. That's a devastating outcome with long-lasting consequences.
Absolutely. It underscores the importance of due diligence, understanding the risks, and seeking expert legal advice before engaging in any international business dealings.
So what are some specific red flags that might indicate a legal system is not as robust or transparent as it should be?
That's a great question. Some potential warning signs, I would say, include a lack of clear and accessible legal information, difficulty obtaining qualified legal representation, or a history of corruption or bias within the judiciary.
It sounds like it's crucial to do your research, understand the potential risks, and have a solid legal strategy in place before you even step foot in another country.
Precisely. It's also essential to have a plan B in case things go wrong. This might involve knowing which embassies or consulates to contact, having access to emergency funds, or even having a trusted local contact who can provide support and guidance.
It's all about being prepared and understanding that the legal system in another country might operate very differently from what you're accustomed to.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of cultural differences. What might be considered acceptable behavior in one culture could be completely inappropriate in another. And those cultural nuances can have a significant impact on how legal proceedings unfold.
So it's not just about knowing the law, it's about understanding the cultural context and navigating those complexities effectively.
Right. And it's important to remember that even if you do everything right, you're not immune to risk. As your case demonstrates, even legitimate business dealings can be manipulated by criminal elements, leading to accusations and legal entanglements that are incredibly difficult to escape.
It's a sobering reminder that international business always carries a certain level of risk, no matter how careful you are.
Precisely. And that's why it's crucial to weigh those risks against the potential rewards and make informed decisions based on a comprehensive understanding of the legal and cultural landscape.
You mentioned that your goal is not only to clear your name, but also to raise awareness and help others avoid becoming victims of similar scams. What specific actions are you taking to achieve those goals?
From the information you shared, it seems you're creating a series of videos to document your experience and expose the tactics used by these criminal networks. This is a powerful way to reach a wider audience and share valuable insights that could potentially prevent others from falling into the same trap.
It's a courageous act to turn your personal ordeal into a platform for advocacy and education.
And it's a testament to your resilience and determination to not only seek justice for yourself, but also to make a positive impact on the world.
I'm curious what kind of response you've received so far. Have others come forward with similar stories or expressed gratitude for shedding light on this issue?
It seems you're still in the early stages of this campaign, but the fact that you're willing to speak out and share your story
Yeah.
is already making a difference. It takes immense courage to step forward, especially when you've been through such a traumatic experience.
And by doing so, you're empowering others to do the same, to break the silence and hold these criminals accountable.
Exactly. And that's how we create real change. By sharing our stories, connecting with others, and demanding a system that prioritizes justice and accountability.
Well, listener, we've explored the intricate web of criminal activity, the challenges of navigating international legal systems, and the power of one individual's voice to spark a movement for change. This deep dive has been a journey into the dark side of globalization, exposing the vulnerabilities that exist and the urgent need for greater awareness and protection. We want to thank you for joining us and for sharing your story. And as we conclude, I just want to leave everyone with a final thought. If these criminals can operate so effectively across borders, what does that say about the global systems meant to protect us? It's a question that deserves careful consideration and a call to action for governments, organizations, and individuals to work together to create a safer and more just world. Thank you for listening.